All right, this is the jig we're going to tie next. It's got a little bit of everything in it that I get the most questions on: how to tie the Marabou, how to put the UV resin on, what size thread I use, what size chenille I use, where I got the eyes from, and the type of UV resin I put on top of the jig. So stick around, watch till the end, like, share, subscribe, let me know what you think, send me a comment, and let's get on with this jig. Okay, so like I showed you in this video, we're gonna concentrate on the two things I get the most questions on: the UV resin coat, stick-on eyes, and tying with Marabou. I'm not a big fan of tying with Marabou usually until I start tying with Marabou. When I start tying with it, I realize how easy it is to tie with when you've got good Marabou. Everything's a little bit different sometimes. Sometimes you'll get a pack that's the best Marabou you'll ever find, and then sometimes it's just like everything else, you run across bad packs of it. But let me show you what I'm looking for when I buy Marabou. I'm looking for the ones that have these long tips on them. That's going to be my tail material. That 1.5 to 2 inches from the top to the bottom. That's mainly what I'm going to use out of a Marabou feather. This Marabou is from Hairline Dubbin. Blood quill Marabous is what I try to look for. That seems to me like that's what usually has the good tips on it. This came from a Plateau Fly Shop in Springfield, but I'm pretty sure you could probably get on a Hairline Dubbin website and be able to order it. You can call the Plateau Fly Shop, tell them that you see me tying with it. They'll know exactly what to get. So let's start tying on this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go. We are going to be tying this jig with an 1/8 ounce freestyle pill head, and that gives me a good flat surface to be able to put my eye on. We're also going to be tying with 210 ultra thread, and you really don't need that heavy of a thread when you're tying this. It's what I've got in the bobbin. 140 will do exactly the right job. So sometimes I don't have exactly what I need every time to tie a jig, and I find what I got to try to help make it work. But we're going to do the same thing like we always do. We're going to use the Sally Hansen's. We're going to put a light coating of it across the shank of that hook. And it don't take a whole lot. You don't really want a big glob drip hanging down from underneath of it. If you do end up with too much on it, go ahead and wrap your jig head, and then just take a Q-tip and dab the rest of it off. But we're going to start our wraps right here behind the head, and then we're just going to follow it all the way down to the point of the hook. Now, a lot of people like to go all the way to that first bend. I don't. I usually go right to the point, work my way all the way back up, and then we're going to trim that tag end off. Just reach up in there and snip it off. Notice I didn't run the scissors on it. What I do is I open my scissors and I kind of use it more like a knife blade and push it through. The 210 is a extremely heavy thread. It's, like I said, it's probably too heavy to tie this jig, but it'll work. It'll help fill the body up. A lot of people are having problems right now getting 210 in stock. So sometimes you just got to use what you have and make it work. We're going to pull off one Marabou feather, and I'm going to pull it all the way down here to the end and see what I've got. Some of these won't quite make the cut. This one probably should. We're going to just pull out just a little bit further, and that's going to give us a pretty good Marabou tail. So I'm going to cut off just a little bit. I'm going to change fingers with it, and I'm going to pull up, and I'm going to cut like right here where this finger is. I'm going to cut that off even. Marabou is one of those ones that's kind of tricky. You want to cut off exactly what you're going to need. You don't want to have to go back and cut the ends off your tails. It's going to change the way your jig looks, and it'll probably affect the way it flows under the water. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch that Marabou between my finger, and I'm going to have a pretty tight grip on it, and I'm going to push it around the shank of that hook. So the shank of the hook is now in the middle of my fingers, and I'm going to take one loose wrap, and I'm going to cinch it down, and I'm going to go back up toward the head. Now I'm not going to completely let go of that Marabou because it's going to go crazy when I do, but I'm just going to kind of stretch it out and keep it straight. And all my whole first layer of wraps is going to be a little bit loose. And then when I work my way back up, that's when I'm going to start making them tighter. I'm going to do 2 complete wraps on the shank of that hook like that, right to the hook point. Then I'm gonna come back up. Now at this point is where I'm gonna add my flash, and I'm gonna use a wider body flash. It's not, I really can't think of what the exact name of it is, but it's just kind of a tinsel, and it could be tinsel flash. I've gotten so much of it, and I've taken it all out of the packages that I don't remember what each one's name of. But that's like the same thing that comes on Christmas trees and Christmas decorations. It's just a tinsel is all it is. And I'm gonna lay this one up here perpendicular with the hook shank, and I'm gonna catch it in with my thread. Now I'm not pulling it super tight and digging it in, because when you do, if you pull it too tight, it will make that flash stand straight up. I want that flash to lay right inside that tail where you can't see it from the side profile, but from the bottom there it is. And then that extra piece that I got hanging up right here, we're just gonna pull it back down, and we're just gonna wrap it back in. So that way I've used one piece, but I've created two pieces of flash in that tail. Go all the way to the head, come all the way back. And like I said, now you can start really putting those good tight wraps on it. And that's what we got so far. So now we're gonna go to the body. And on this body, I'm also using hairline dubbing, and I'm using solid tinsel rainbow chenille. This came from Plateau Fly Shop. They had some of it in. You could probably find it on Hairline Dubbin's website, or you could call Plateau Fly Shop. They probably mail it to you. And so we're gonna get that chenille. And since this is a bigger profile jig, we're gonna run it starting at the head. We're gonna wrap it all the way down to the point of the hook, and then we're gonna come all the way back up to the head with it. We're gonna kind of double it up just to help bulk that body up, to give that jig a little more mass than what it would have if you just tied it here and then just started wrapping. So we're gonna wrap that chenille all the way down to the point of the hook, keeping all your marabou kind of pulled back and out of the way, and then we're gonna come all the way back up toward the head. We're gonna get right here to the head, and we're gonna pull our bobbin down just a little bit further, and then we're gonna start wrapping. If you don't have a rotary function vise, just keep wrapping it, but make sure you're keeping it tight. I'm gonna pull that chenille out toward the side, and you'll be able to see how tight I'm getting it by the flex of that hook on how that jig head's moving. Actually got a little bit on the hook. But we're just gonna wrap it. I'm gonna get here at the body, right in the middle section where it should be bulked up a little bit more. And I'm gonna let it build up right there for just another wrap or two. And then I'm gonna bring it all the way back down to the head and let it kind of taper back down. So you kind of got this wider spot right here in the middle. We're gonna go right to the head, and we're gonna pull it down on this side of our thread, and we're gonna wrap it. And now we're gonna go around the head one more time. And then I'm gonna wrap the chenille back around the head again to fill some of that in. And then we're gonna wrap the bobbin back around the chenille twice. I'm gonna pull it up nice and tight. Give it about 3 or 4 good wraps right there, and then we're just gonna clip it off. Now we're gonna whip finish it. We're just about done with this jig. Even though it's got eyes in it, it's not as complicated as what you would think it is. Pop it out, we're gonna give it one more nice, tight little knot. Make sure it's getting tight, and we're gonna reach up in there, and we're gonna cut that thread off. All right, so next is gonna be our eyes. I had a very hard time finding good quality eyes. I got these that come on this clear plastic sheet from Limits Tackle. I'll try to tag them in the video so that way y'all be able to find it. This is an 1/8 ounce freestyle head, and I'm gonna be putting 5mm eyes on it. It took me a while to be able to figure out each size head, what eyes they required. The 5mm, I can also use on a 16th. I can use on an 1/8. When I go up above an 1/8, then I gotta go to a 6mm eye. The 32nds of 64ths are 2s and 3mm, depending on what size head you got. But this is an 1/8 ounce, 5mm eye works perfect. You can find these Limits Tackle. So we're gonna pull, each one of these eyes have got a little adhesive back to it. We're gonna pull that eye off and stick it right to that jig head, right inside that where that eye socket is. And the eyes I got from Lemons Tackle, you got to make sure you get it right in the right spot because it's hard to move afterwards. You know you got a good quality eye when you can't slide it back and forth around with your finger. So you got to make sure that your placement is pretty good. I don't use the tweezers. I don't use the little needle. My fingers don't work good enough for those little tweezers. I just pull it off, let it stick on the back of my finger, and then just slide it right off on that jig head right into the socket where that eye's at, and then just push it down in there. And there you have it. It's on. They're on tight too. I'm not gonna accidentally end up brushing it off with the UV resin. The UV resin I'm gonna be using on this jig is Alumalite. I had a subscriber send it to me. This is probably the best resin I've ever used. It cures very fast, it cures very hard, it's clear, extremely durable. It works absolutely wonderful, but we're gonna get pretty good sized drip on the end of that brush. And I'm gonna not only coat the eyes, but I'm also coating the head too. So I'm gonna start with the UV resin up here on the back of the head, and I'm just gonna push it over. And then I'm also pushing that UV resin down against that thread body on that neck. And that way when I get it underneath my UV lights, it's gonna cure not just the head, the eyes, but it's also gonna seal up that thread where that neck is. You wanna be careful. Try not to get it in the eye of the jig head if you can help it. Once it gets in the eye of that jig head, it's extremely tough to get it back out. So once I got it to where I got the UV resin brushed all over the head and on the eyes, I'm gonna give it a quick little cure with the UV light, and that's gonna set the UV resin up. It's not gonna harden it, it's not gonna cure it. It's gonna get it to where it's kind of tacky and it's a super thick consistency, so that way when I hang it vertically upside down in my UV box, I'm not gonna get a big drip or run right here at the head of it. So this is kind of first step to curing it. The UV box, when it comes down to this, putting eyes on, it's definitely worth the money to build one. But we got that one ready to go in the box. Like I said, that's a Marabou stick-on eyes, 1/8 ounce jig head, 5mm eyes, Alumalite UV resin, solid tinsel rainbow Chanel, and hairline dubbing Marabou, blood quill Marabou. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think. If you haven't yet, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and give me ideas on what y'all want to see next.